Right, and so just to let you know, Malik, we've got folks that couldn't make it to the meeting, so they come in and watch this afterwards. We're finding probably 2/3 of the views of our sessions at Leadership at Lunchtime occur after the fact, just because of how busy people are starting to get as we return to full workforce. So let me welcome you and everyone else to today's session. And I've been looking forward to this for a while now. We had such a delightful talk last month. Was it last month? It was a while ago now.
A while ago.
Yeah, and the world hasn't changed at all since we talked. So luckily, all of our planning factors are the same. And I was so excited that you had the opportunity to speak with us on, this topic about managing risk. I think that risk has become quite apparent to many of us in the workplace these days. And as we manage that risk, we can't avoid it. And so it's mitigation, it's utilization of risk to turn it into opportunity. And so, here in a minute, I'd like to kind of ask you some questions, and we'll do just a chat. But let me introduce you to the folks that are dialing in or will watch the recorded version of this. I mean, you have got experience in Booz Allen, you've got experience in Pfizer, in Citibank, KPMG, General Electric, all small companies, right? So we think about it. These are, and then currently at PricewaterhouseCoopers, particularly looking at, the role that you had. I don't know if you changed roles recently. I saw a new title pop up in LinkedIn, but the deals HR due diligence for Western region. It seems to me that, that risk is vital to you to understand that. And so let me start by asking a question, and it's just about the concept. How do you think we should rethink risk awareness and management in our current environment? Both COVID-19 plus the economic impact of it, or what hasn't changed? What stays the same? So let's just put it in the big context of what we're facing right now and are going to face for the foreseeable future.
Well, what hasn't changed for most organizations is their how they generate profit. What has changed is the environment, how they make profit. Both a lot of social factors have come into play, primarily due to technology and how communication flows and the different generational differences in the demographics of our workforce. So all that is coming together to really change how we incorporate different softer risk issues that come into play. They may not be validated, but they need to be addressed in order to keep the organization focused.
Mm-hmm. Are there any themes that you're seeing right now that are kind of go with that question of what's staying the same and what's changing for folks? Are they paying attention to different indicators? Is there?
Yeah. So what hasn't changed is the governance, risk, and compliance that most organizations operate within. What has changed is the ability to factor in other risks, political, health, and social equality factors that are stemming from our external environment. Organizations do a good job of insulating those issues by training their leaders to address them within the organization. But now there's an uneasiness and unrest that has transpired that is affecting the workforce. And all eyes are on the business leaders to say, are you going to respond? Are you going to do the right thing? So it's kind of forcing the hand of leadership to respond to these macro issues that are coming into play.
Yeah, I think in the past, perhaps we gave those type of strategic leaders a bit of a pass and presumed that they knew what was coming and they didn't have to tell me everything because I think they've got it well in hand. And now there's perhaps a greater need for transparency and an understanding of approach.
Yeah.
Yeah. That also seems to tie into kind of security, you know, my job security or organizational security. You know, and then can you pull out that magic crystal ball and predict the future for me, please, so I can make certain that I'm employed and we're continuing serving our customers.
So what we're seeing is, in addition to, you know, managing, monitoring the information that organizations usually look at, whether it's your financials, your operations, your headcount information. Now organizations are doing more real-time diagnostics, assessments, and pulse checks to measure the sentiments of customers, patients, employees, leadership towards different possible courses of action to respond to these external pressures, to communicate and share information with the workforce and their customers. You know, I'll throw in technology, Qualtrics. It's a technology that offers organizations an opportunity to survey and do really robust analysis. Lots of organizations are doing that. SurveyMonkey, you know, just-in-time surveys are going out to get a pulse on a specific issue, how employees and customers are, you know, reacting or their feelings, the softer things that come across so that leadership and organizations can respond with empathy. Empathy is a big theme that needs to come across in how we communicate with our different audiences. In order to establish that, you have to get that pulse.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I would think that, you know, in times of calm, I don't know that we've ever seen them, but, you know, let's make believe there is a time of calm someplace. We would think that would be a best practice, that, you know, you should be able to have that pulse and that open communication channel with the people that you're serving, either inside or outside the institution. Now it seems to be a survival factor, and particularly as you're describing it, is that becomes competitive advantage, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Being able, well, you can't create that overnight. Because in order to do that authentically, the employees, the customers, the patients you have to build a trusting relationship. And that develops over time. And, you know, those organizations who started to, I don't want to say hardwire those mechanisms in their culture, because it's kind of an oxymoron. Culture is not hardwired, but you can. Some organizations will be in catch-up and survival mode. Others are thriving.
Yeah. So when we have, you know, let's talk about organizational risk management. I mean, I know that a lot of us think about kind of enterprise risk registers, the tools, you know, such as like a heat map. There's a lot of ways for us to try to capture this institutionally to help manage and mitigate the risk we have to take. So
Right.
what are your thoughts about that? How relevant are those approaches currently? Or do we need to rethink how we, at the mid and top of an organization, build our risk situational awareness and the ability
Yeah.
to kind of let that influence our strategic decision-making processes?
So it is changing. There's more pressure in the middle layer to engage in a different framework. Some cultures, remote work was unheard of and it was frowned upon. And this has forced their hand to, especially for those frontline managers, to adapt and identify ways to measure productivity, engage, monitor, and create team environments within this unusual circumstances that some organizations are facing for the first time. Those, from a hierarchy perspective, managers need to think about daily, weekly, monthly, and the annual reviews for each of the employees, but also the team element, because nothing can replace in-person interaction. Those of us on this call, other than the people we're quarantining and where we pick up our groceries, and if we still need to fill gas if we're driving to places, there's very little live interaction, and that can cause also the behavioral and health issues. So organizations are having to look at how they support the whole employee, not just the employee who is carrying out their work duties, but in the new normal that we're working under, it's the employee who's doing their work and responsibilities, but also has 3 kids at home that they have to manage, impromptu, homeschooling, elderly care. Lots of families are now living together in extended circumstances. So managers are expected to address the whole person, not just the person who's an employee. And HR plays a key role in providing some of those resources related to that, health and wellness, financial wellness. Organizations are extending or their leave plans, introducing more flexibility around the work hours and the work schedule to accommodate their new home environment and work conditions. There's a lot that a manager needs to get a pulse on, and one-on-one conversations are going to be the norm, because there's a lot of challenges that employees are facing.
Yeah, the light bulb just went on for me when because that first question was about kind of like an enterprise risk register, or a corporate risk plan.
Yes.
And my experience with those has been almost always they're external facing. They're looking for market shift. They're looking for consumer buyer behavior. And there is some, the internal stuff would be, do we have the right skill set? Do we have enough craft and skilled labor to actually pipe fitters to deliver the projects? This is almost taking to a new level that we should be thinking of at the top of the organization of, do we have leaders at the ground level that are capable of doing dispersed labor leadership? Do we have the capacity to maintain that one-on-one touch, particularly since the planning assumption that our workforce had to be present and in place to deliver value? It tells me that we've got to at least go back to some part of the drawing board when we start looking at enterprise risk, particularly in terms of workforce.
Yeah, the upskilling and working remotely, you know, we had, you know, a slight hiccup just starting this call. Working remotely really is pushing the boundary on getting the workforce comfortable with technology and how to meld that into a natural native way of doing your work and interacting with customers, clients. Again, you know, the managers need to be equipped and become comfortable before they can get their employees comfortable, and assessing, you know, the maturity of those skills in your workforce is the first step. Doing an assessment of how comfortable the people leaders are with some of the technology-enabled processes that have to be weaved into the day-to-day of how they carry out their people leadership responsibilities. That's a key element. And then also being able to, in real time, broadly escalate the issues that we're seeing patterns within those levels and do a broader organizational pulse so that it can be addressed in real time. Real time being, you know, having a communication go out in 4 to 6 weeks. We can't wait for those annual organizational climate surveys or 6-month surveys where, you know, the results are 3 months old by the time you're sharing it back to the organization. That is not that is not the new normal. It needs to be more real time and turned around.
Well, and I think as you said, that situational awareness is, we no longer can delay, you know, to tolerate the lag. And the real time challenge to that is having automation, digitization that supports that, I'm guessing. And so those of us that started a digital transformation earlier may be at some advantage right now, but I think that, you know, because my next question was kind of, you know, the risks and the strategies that leaders should be considering to kind of navigate these waters ahead of us, both in the short and then the midterm. You know, digital analysis or digital transformation may be one of those, of having more real-time data. What are some of the other, and so I'm going to kind of roll those questions together, which is kind of what should they be paying attention to, and then what should they be doing at kind of the mid-grade in companies? You know, below the C-suite, they may be junior executives, but they're leading functional or multifunctional areas.
Yeah. The key risk is reputational risk, I would say, for organizations in terms of how they respond in the current new normal. And the new normal 6 months from now is going to look very different. We know we're never going to go back to what it was. It's absolutely not going to be, you know, it'll be in history books, we'll read about it. How we communicate and explain our risk mitigation plans in a authentic, credible, empathetic way is going to be critical both internally and externally. Because at the end of the day, Mike, as organizations, we want to win in the market. And for those organizations who understand that our talent is going to drive that success, will have already set the foundation to be able to engage their employees in the solutions that are being proposed, and also in the execution of the solutions, and be able to mobilize in a efficient, effective manner to respond to the risk and respond to those opportunities. Those companies who have not laid those foundations, those strong communication mechanisms, the digitization to get information, not only, communications is verbal, but it's also analytical and business information that you share the appropriate levels across the organization to the employees. So having all that in place, is going to lead the organization to success.
Yeah. And I like the idea that there are phases that we have to pay attention to here. So in early days and near term, there's a different risk profile. And we can actually shape the risk that follows by how we approach the risk now. So by implementing either a digital capacity for situational awareness communication, by having stronger communicative channels with our internal, external partners, customers, that changes the risk that we might face in 6 months from now. And I love the idea of shaping the future, because it kind of feels like we have very little control over a lot of the future right now. So our ability to manage risk, to kind of create those end states, is the powerful tool for us psychologically, as well as I think operationally in a business. So.
Yeah. There's, with the return to work and the combined with the remote workforce, that's going to be in everybody's business strategy. How do you balance that? We're going to see a stronger voice of the workforce wanting to have greater flexibility around those policy decisions, and the business leadership need to have the appropriate governance, risk, and compliance infrastructure to provide that flexibility in the workforce strategy. So, if they're playing catch up, now is a good time to play catch up. It's going to take investment in setting those infrastructure and in place, but the sooner the better, because we're not going back.
Yeah. So I've been hogging your time because I'm interested in this topic, but Adam's got some questions that have come through, so let's go ahead and let him pitch those.
Okay.
Hi, Malik. Given that a pandemic is not unheard of, we had the experience of SARS and was flagged on a number of governmental risk assessments. Is your sense that our corporate risk assessments were found wanting?
Adam, can you repeat that again? Sorry.
Oh, absolutely. So given that a pandemic is not unheard of, we had the experience of SARS and was flagged on it was flagged on a number of governmental risk assessments. Is it your sense that our corporate risk assessments were found wanting?
found wanting, meaning they should have had that on their radar and addressed in a risk mitigation conversation at a senior leadership level.
Correct. Were we prepared for this?
For the current pandemic, no, we weren't prepared, and we should have taken it more seriously. But at a broader level, I think organizations have tended to shy away from addressing health policy within the organization. And this has been a wake-up call for organizations to, make it part of their governance risk and compliance model. Those health risks that are on a global basis and regional will become part of the norm as an indicator for organizations to monitor. On a similar basis, companies have done a good job of including, travel bans for risk, political unrest in certain countries. That type of indicator has become more prevalent. Now the health indicators are going to be more prevalent.
What's interesting, I think, is that we're always wrestling with the realm of the possible versus the probable, because we can never truly prepare for all the possibilities. And so we're playing a probability lottery in perspective and saying, I'm going to assume this is an unlikely event. And so, the question is how much effort do I put into preparing for that unlikely event as a contingency rollout? And I think that's constantly the choice. And don't we have a little bit of bias that we go on the last thing that happened that becomes the freshest in our memory? I suspect every company for the next 20 years will be thinking about pandemic and maybe not the political risks that you were talking about.
I would say what's going to also come out of this is that organizations are going to identify credible third-party think tanks that they can tap into for these type of indicators. That will become part of their framework.
So almost an early warning system, so that as we see these lead indicators, then it actually points us to put more effort into the preparation or the potential for executing a contingency op.
Yeah, and being able to get information in a timely manner from credible resources that address the magnitude and the velocity of how, this could potentially impact your business.
Okay.
I had another question come through, Malik. In a large company with thousands of now remote employees and tons of data, what are the best companies doing to streamline information sharing and information reporting?
So everything is in the cloud for organizations who are leading in the digitization. And creating very simple dashboards for at appropriate levels of your audience. I've worked extensively in sales organizations, so the dashboard for a sales employee is going to look very different than a dashboard for a doctor and the patients they're going to see. So being able to funnel relevant information to your audience in order for them to do their job more effectively and work smarter, that's going to be the mantra of how organizations take the wealth of information and I'm going to say cull it out for your relevant employee population or your customers too. You know, if you're a consumer products company and you offer a variety of products, you want to be able to present relevant products to the customer segmentations that you have and the customer personas that you have. Similarly, for employees, you know, they're the customers of the organization. Identify the different personas of employees that exist in your company. You're not going to be able to segment them to, you know, individual granular level, but you'll have good defined personas that you can target and send relevant information to.
Thank you, Malik. I've got one more question for you here.
Sure.
In this current time, what companies do you see are doing the best at managing these new reputational risks? It seems like there are a lot of executives that are making corporate statements more out of fear of missing out than real leadership to drive us out of these trying times.
What they're doing, the leaders who are really leading on that front is also engaging employees to help communicate their view that aligns with how the business leader has communicated the position. Now, that position, if they did it correctly, reflects the employees. So you're really mobilizing the entire organization to support the same message, and that can be very powerful.
And as we look at that, it's the consistency of messaging that's also congruent with the core values of the institution.
Yes.
I think that is absolutely so vital, because folks are going to spot a fraud a mile off if they're giving lip service to, you know, representation of the diversity of our nation. If they're giving lip service to, we're going to take care of all of our employees, but we know what we're going to do is actually save our labor cost. Then it actually has a counter effect to it, doesn't it? So it's, I'm interested in business ethics and core values and culture. So for me, that's such a compelling statement that you've made, which is that communication has to be tapped into at a fundamental basis of our reason for existence. So.
Yeah, let me throw out a cliche and say grassroots, citizen-led. You know, these are themes, and it kind of, you know, it harkens back to, you know, the 60s and 70s revolution of, rebelling against, you know, mainstream. It's this is my personal opinion. I see analogous events with that period and what's going on today, but the environment and the context is different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, because I think that's the exhaustion of the participant questions. Adam just sent me a text. Let me always, I like to do at the end is, you know, give you a chance of, you know, tell a story to the young Malik, or tell a story to the folks that are listening in, of just what your final thoughts are and kind of what you would, you know, I go back to the statement that with great risk comes great opportunity, and the greatest opportunities we have almost always carry some of the greatest risk. So what, you know, what guidance would you give us from what you've seen in your positions of executive responsibility for how do we balance those? How, you know, what's some great takeaways that you could share with us, and basically boil the ocean to us in 3 minutes or less for how we become perfect leaders?
I would say that being able to present a point of view that incorporates the current information that you have accessible to in and as quickly as possible, knowing that the information will further be refined and it's iterative. Lots of leaders want perfect information before they create or make a decision. Getting comfortable with having gaps in your ideas, but being able to explain all the inputs and knowing that it's going to be an iterative process, and getting inputs from different, subject matter experts to move your ideas forward. That is really key. Getting comfortable with having gaps of information, but pulling in whatever you do have access to.
That dovetails so nicely with what we've heard through some of our crisis leadership conversations months ago, which is,
Mm-hmm.
Tell them what you know, tell them what you don't know,
Mm-hmm.
tell them how you're going to find out the difference, how you're going to kind of fill those gaps in. And that's, it creates a sense of security and comfort that at least we have transparency of communication. And
Yes.
So I am appreciative of the time you took out of the day, and I know it's early morning for you because the whole West Coast thing, right?
Yes.
So thank you so much. I look forward for us to kind of continue to grow this relationship and to look for your advice and guidance on executive MBAs and from there. I'm really very thankful for you to join us today. So thank you so very much for the whole team and the students of the EMBA program and our community at University of Tennessee. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Have a great day, everyone.